Ms. Johnson, if you just begin by stating your name and your affiliation.
Good morning. I'm Linda E. Johnson, and I'm President and CEO of Brooklyn Public Library. I'm happy to be here this morning, and I'd just like to take a moment before I begin to thank all of you and the Assembly for the recent capital allocation that was made to Brooklyn Public Library. We're deeply appreciative, as are our patrons who ultimately benefit from funding such as this. So please let me express on the behalf of the library, our board, and our patrons our gratitude. Brooklyn Public Library is one of the largest library systems in the United States, delivering exceptional library services to 2.5 million Brooklynites at 60 locations throughout the borough. Our extensive physical footprint is one of our greatest assets. Few, if any, social service organizations in Brooklyn provide service from as many locations as we, or can boast of operating facilities in virtually every one of the borough's diverse communities. Maintaining this presence and ensuring that no community in Brooklyn is without library service are of paramount importance to Brooklyn Public Library. Our nearly 1 million square foot physical plant is, however, a challenge to maintain. As you know, BPL, like library systems throughout the state, face extraordinary fiscal pressure. We have seen government support drop at a time when nearly all our metrics for library usage are at or near record levels. We are incredibly grateful that last weekend the City Council and the Mayor agreed to a fiscal 2014 budget that fully restores a proposed 36% cut to our operating funding. However, we still struggle with over $300 million in deferred maintenance for all 60 of our libraries. The average age of a BPL facility is 58 years, and almost all our branches suffer from maintenance problems. We receive an average of merely $15 million a year from the city to maintain our buildings. This funding is far from adequate and has left too many neighborhoods in Brooklyn with substandard physical facilities. Brooklyn Public Library is making great strides to reinvent the way we provide library service by pioneering new programs and services and continually adapting our public service to meet the ever-changing needs of Brooklyn's diverse communities. Unfortunately, our physical plant in many Brooklyn neighborhoods fails to meet the needs of our patrons and the demands of 21st century library service. Addressing this problem requires creativity and a diverse toolkit of options. Over the last several years, Brooklyn Public Library has made aggressive efforts to increase private support for the library. We recently revamped our development department. We've appointed a new vice president of development. And late last year, we opened the groundbreaking Shelby White and Leon Levy Information Commons at the Central Library. This innovative co-working space was funded by a generous grant from the Leon Levy Foundation and is already among the most heavily used spaces in Central Library. We are in the early stages of the planning process to relocate our business and career library to Central Library and create a state-of-the-art small business and career support resource ideally located to serve all Brooklyn residents. We hope to identify private funders to support this project as well. Unfortunately, private fundraising can only go so far. As any non-for-profit leader can tell you, raising private funds to pay for basic infrastructure needs, especially in city-owned buildings, is extraordinarily difficult. For the vast majority of library branches in Brooklyn, we will have to continue to rely on support from our elected officials. We are currently managing many capital projects, including upgrading critical infrastructure at our Clinton Hill branch and totally renovating our Rugby branch. At other branches, BPL is working with other nonprofits to provide new and unique services and improve our buildings. In Red Hook and Williamsburg, we are working with a new organization, SpaceWorks, whose mission is to manage affordable workspaces for community-based artists. SpaceWorks will assist with renovations at our Red Hook and Williamsburg branches, create artist workspaces in those branches, and provide free arts education programming for library patrons. In addition to these strategies, strategies, BPL is also pursuing 2 unique redevelopment opportunities in downtown Brooklyn that would eliminate millions of dollars in unmet capital needs while developing 2 brand-new modern library facilities. Both of these projects would take advantage of the uniquely valuable real estate occupied by 2 existing branches to significantly improve the quality of library service in Brooklyn for generations to come. Brooklyn Public Library is thrilled to have the opportunity to participate in these exciting projects. As part of BAM South, BPL will open a brand-new 16,500 square foot neighborhood library facility. This new branch will be among the newest and most modern library branches in New York City and will allow BPL to deliver truly 21st century library service to the Fort Greene, Park Slope, and Boerum Hill communities. We are excited about working with the community to develop a design and program for the new branch that truly reflects the diverse needs of our patrons and leverages the branch's unique location at the center of one of the city's most exciting cultural communities. The new branch will be ideally located above one of the busiest transit hubs in New York City, and we hope that it will quickly emerge as a regional library hub capable of offering expanded programming available for all Brooklynites. Our original plan was to fund the fit-out of this new space at BAM South through the sale of our aging Pacific Street facility. The Pacific Street Library is over 110 years old and suffers from approximately $10 million in capital needs. The branch is poorly laid out and, like too many of our older buildings, is not accessible to people with disabilities or to anyone with limited mobility. Of the 18 Carnegie branches managed by BPL, Pacific has by far the most pressing and expensive needs. However, as we have discussed our proposed project with elected officials and community stakeholders over the last 6 months, it has become clear that the community greatly values the architecture of the Pacific Street building, as do we, and has concerns about library service moving from that location. We take seriously our responsibility to steward the architectural legacy of the Pacific Street branch, as well as the 17 other Carnegie libraries in Brooklyn. BPL is committed to working with elected officials and community stakeholders to develop an appropriate plan for the Pacific Street building through an open community process. The plan will acknowledge the needs of the library and the community. This plan could include maintaining some or all of the Pacific Street building and continuing to provide library service and programming for children in the community. Due to the significant financial issues associated with the Pacific Street branch, we cannot rule out selling the building, but we are committed to working with the community to explore other potential options that would also address our financial concerns. Our Brooklyn Heights branch poses similar challenges and opportunities. This 1962 building is the only BPL facility other than Central to house 2 distinct operating units and suffers from a poor layout with less than half of its 62,000 square feet open to the public and has an inefficient floor plan that hinders public service. It also faces over $9.2 million in capital needs, including an estimated $3.5 to $4.5 million needed to replace a non-functioning HVAC system. Our plan would realize the unique value of the real estate on which the Brooklyn Heights branch is located to develop a new, better branch to serve the neighborhood. Over the last several months, BPL has worked with a community advisory committee made up of all the elected officials as well as representatives from 5 community organizations and tenant groups to draft a redevelopment process that will respect the needs of the community, build the best branch possible for BPL, and generate additional capital dollars that can be reinvested in branches throughout Brooklyn. We have worked to be as transparent as possible throughout the redevelopment process at Brooklyn Heights. By convening the Community Advisory Committee, BPL has actively sought the community's input in every phase of the project to date, and we plan to continue doing so. Last Thursday, in partnership with the New York City Economic Development Corporation, we released a request for proposals that will guide our selection of a development partner for Brooklyn Heights. Our RFP, first and foremost, requires the selected development partner to build and deliver to the city at no cost to BPL the core and shell of a new 20,000 square foot library, one of the 5 largest libraries in Brooklyn. No more than 5,000 square feet of the new library may be below grade, and the library must have a separate and distinct entrance from the rest of the building. The library will be conveyed to the City of New York as a condominium unit for no more than $1. Our new Brooklyn Heights branch will be a city-owned, public building operated by BPL, just as the existing branch is. BPL has committed to providing interim library system throughout the redevelopment process and will do so either in partnership with our development partner or by using some of the funds generated by the sale of the property. The RFP specifies that library services BPL has committed to providing in an interim service location. We are eager to provide a public process to design the new branch. The RFP also contains a number of important safeguards to protect BPL and the public's interest throughout the redevelopment process. We will include a right of reacquisition in the contract of sale. This provision will allow the city to reacquire title of the property if a development partner fails to deliver the core and shell of the new library to BPL by a specified date. The city will never lose control of the site, and if a development partner defaults or otherwise fails to meet the terms of the contract, the city will reacquire the site and rebuild the library in its current location. Several other terms will protect BPL through this process. The selected development partner will be required to close on the acquisition of property simultaneously with a closing on construction financing. BPL will have the right to continue operating the library in the existing building up until construction commences, at no cost to BPL. The development partner will be required to post a financial security sufficient to fund the construction of the core and shell as a prerequisite for closing. As part of this process, BPL has negotiated a groundbreaking agreement with the city that will allow us to realize the proceeds generated by selling city-owned property. BPL will use these proceeds to fit out the new library and will reinvest the remaining proceeds in other libraries across the borough. By pursuing this strategy, BPL can deliver a large, modern library in Brooklyn Heights while generating significant and much-needed capital dollars for library branches borough-wide. Our Brooklyn Heights and BAM South projects represent 2 of several strategies by which BPL is seeking to maintain and enhance Andrew Carnegie's priceless legacy of free and accessible public libraries for all Brooklyn residents. I look forward to continuing to work with Brooklyn's elected officials and community leaders to ensure that all Brooklynites have access to the best possible library facilities and services for decades to come. And I'm happy to stay and answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Johnson, we appreciate that, and we have 2 of Brooklyn's finest elected officials here with us today, and I think they have a couple questions. Assemblyman Mosley, would you like to begin?
I just have a good morning, President Johnson.
Good
to see you
morning.
again. First of all, I'd like to thank you for not closing the Clinton Hill branch upon its renovation, so I'm happy for that. You talked about your VP for development having some hurdles to overcome. Can you elaborate a little bit on what those issues and concerns at the VP of development?
Certainly. One of the issues that all libraries, frankly, face is that there's a perception that tax dollars should be paying for library services and library facilities, and that people are already contributing when they're paying their taxes. And the other problem is that when you're subject to a sort of steady stream of cuts, as we have been since 2008, private philanthropists are loath to contribute money to libraries because it feels like they are actually allowing the city to further cut our budgets. It's a sort of no-win situation, and that private gifts can actually accomplish far more if given to non-city-run agencies.
Assemblywoman Millman?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for appearing here today. I'd like to start out by asking you, though I know the answer to the question, when did you come to BPL?
Actually, almost 3 years ago, but the first year I was here on an interim basis.
So a lot of these situations you walked into, and you were faced with making some hard decisions, many of which I don't like, but I see that they were not you didn't create them. They were here when you got here. So I appreciate you. You talked about at the very end of the testimony, and then I have some other questions about the selling at Pacific Street and at Brooklyn Heights branch are only two of several strategies, but you don't go into what other strategies are you talking about?
Well, as I testified, the two libraries that are part of the discussion these days, both internally with our stakeholders in the communities and in the press, these are libraries that are sort of at the top of our list. They have extreme capital needs, and there are terrific opportunities for us to take care of those communities without needing to raise vast sums of money externally. So they are, in essence, the low-hanging fruit, Brooklyn Heights in particular, and that's where we're moving first and most quickly. But there are other libraries throughout the borough that have serious capital needs where the similar kinds of opportunities are not available. And so we are planning to take the proceeds from Brooklyn Heights, for example, to use them to make the libraries that are providing services in neighborhoods that don't have these kinds of resources in a much better, more attractive, more desirable facility. We do not, at this time, have plans to sell any other libraries, if that's what your question is getting at.
Well, frankly, even if you were able to realize, let's use a big figure, $100 million, right, from the sale of the Brooklyn Heights property, the capital needs throughout the entire system wouldn't be met by that sale. So, I mean, we need to think, I think, of long-term strategies and how to provide the capital dollars that BPL needs so much. But I'd like to ask you about, you said in your testimony, the average age for one of our buildings in Brooklyn is about 58 years old.
Correct.
Now, I know my brother's house is now currently 65 years of age, old. He's not selling it off. He's been doing something that I used to be a school teacher, and what we always used was maintenance of effort. You had to do that all the time. So for years and years, I believe, and I think you would probably agree, there has not been maintenance of effort for our branches throughout the system.
No question.
So now we come across air conditioning system in Brooklyn Heights that faulted over 30 days last summer, and so the library had to be closed. And that comes in at the tune, I believe you said at some of our meetings, about $9 million to replace.
There's other capital needs in that branch as
well. I know, I'm just targeting that one.
Yep.
Because I think that if we had a strategic plan that would put dollars into libraries as on an ongoing basis, and I know the question is where do we get them, but if we did that on an ongoing basis, we wouldn't be faced with the condition of we need to sell off complete buildings because they're so badly run down, we can't think of a way of patching them up to make them work for another 58 years.
Well, the problem is that because we get too little money on an annual basis, we are actually doing all of the capital projects when we're in a sort of crisis situation, as Brooklyn Heights is a good example of this. We are not in a situation where we can do preventative maintenance, which is how you would handle your brother's 65-year-old house. So we are spending money in a less than efficient way, only because of the amount of money that we get each year, and that we're able to use to take care of our physical plant.
Now, I know that, and I mentioned this earlier, the Park Slope Library, which I also represent, underwent a wonderful renovation. It was closed for more time than you and we had talked about this, would have liked to have seen, but it was done. And they have now, the facade is the same. There is now accessibility for individuals with disabilities. We have had minor repairs to another branch that I represent, which is in Carroll Gardens. An elevator was installed. It is an old building. Brooklyn is an old borough, especially downtown. And they have the layout is terrible in Carroll Gardens. The auditorium, which is constantly used, has bigger pillars than this, which block everybody's view at all times. but it is constantly used, and I haven't heard anybody talk, thankfully, of selling that off to build housing, though that is it's a prime real estate neighborhood as well. Since I represent it, I know it. So it seems to me that I would like to say this. In all the years that I've been the member of the Assembly, I have not been asked once, not once, individually, for dollars for BPL. I've been asked to, as a delegation, we've been asked, people prior to your coming to BPL, and in prior years they've asked for massive amounts of capital money, and we did the best we could in the Assembly side. I can't speak for the other agencies, other parts of government, for money for Central Library, and when we've been able to do it, we've been happy to do it. But I think in terms, and that's why I asked the director of New York Public Library about that money. Now, it would be nice if all of our elected officials from all levels understood the need, as I do, for putting dollars into our public library system in Brooklyn. We have a diverse population. We have many, many languages spoken. Libraries do a wonderful job. I'm a cheerleader for libraries. I always have been. And for books and electronics coming in, the way people use our libraries. And in down economic times, more and more people in every borough use the library for all sorts of reasons. People love their libraries. And even if they tell you they use it every day, maybe they don't, but when they want to use it, they want it open, and they want to find the books there, the technology there, they want to find the services that they've grown to love and appreciate that they deserve in our borough. So I think what I'd like to say, not only about the Carnegie Library, but about the Brooklyn Heights Library and every branch in Brooklyn, we need to have a better plan than what you're presenting to us. I think that we need to see a concentrated effort from the borough president to the city council to our colleagues in the Assembly and the Senate. And I know my colleague, Mr. Mosley, will agree Brooklyn has the largest delegation in Albany. We probably have the largest delegation in the city council because the sheer numbers of population. We should be doing more constructively to help out BPL. And I think that we have to work on that with maybe not this administration, because I don't think that their ears are open to those kind of things, but with the next administration, so that our public policy doesn't have to be, let's sell a building and create a new building and it'll be better for everybody. I still don't know in Brooklyn Heights where in the world you think you can put an interim library. And you don't have to answer it, because I'm just saying I know what I live in Brooklyn Heights. I know the area surrounding Brooklyn Heights. I know what the property values are there. And if you think you can put a bookmobile in front of the original site, I don't think it's going to work. It was a solution, and I think Park Slope lived with that solution because they knew at the end of the day, no matter how long it took, they would have their library back in their space, and they wouldn't have to share it with luxury condos on top of it. So I just want to say I'm more than willing to work with all of you to see that we come up with the dollars that we need, and we may be short, but we can't put aside this maintenance that we talk about, because you're right, you can't go to a library when it's 90 degrees inside. That doesn't make it pleasant for anybody, and that's why you needed to, and rightly so, close the library during the summer. And I know you've made good plans and strategies for giving us extra hours, opening up it earlier in Brooklyn Heights when it's not as hot, but the end result is, as I said, twice already, if not 3 times, a better strategy so that we can come away with the things that you guys want at BPL, and that we, the constituents, and I'm a constituent also of somebody here, right? I'm sure, that we come up with a better plan so we keep our libraries operating and in the best, and moving ahead to all the technology that you guys need and that everybody wants. But I thank you again for coming to see us today.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm proud of the work that we've done. I think there is not one solution for the entire borough, and we're working hard on finding as many creative solutions as we can, but of course would welcome to the offer that you make, and we'll take you up on the offer that you make to work with us to come up with a better plan, and of course to fund that plan.
Ms. Johnson, a couple questions specifically about the Brooklyn Heights RFP. You said that about 31,000 feet currently of the 62,000 feet are being used, but yet the RFP only calls for a replacement of 20,000 feet.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, so the current branch is 62,000 square feet, and it's got a number of square feet that are, as you point out, not accessible to the public. A lot of that is below grade and is used as storage. The square footage that is available to the public is poorly laid out, very wide stairwells and those sorts of things, all of which are being counted in the square feet. And it's not flexible space. It was built in 1962, and our plan is to build a somewhat smaller, not much, 7,000 square feet, smaller library, but it will be so much more flexible and so much better conceived that it will actually provide better service in that square footage.
I just don't understand Brooklyn Heights. It's been explained to me by my brothers who've decamped from Manhattan, from my district to Assemblywoman Millman's district, that Brooklyn is the new Manhattan. And if Brooklyn Heights is such a hot neighborhood, why can't we demand to get the full 27,000, if not more space back? And secondly, I appreciate everyone's sentiment, but we have a lot of speakers to get through, so. Secondly, why just a shell? Why are we not requiring the developer to do a full build out? And what is BPL still going to be on the hook for Brooklyn Heights after that shell is completed? The
library will fit out from the paint in on that particular library.
But why not ask the developer to pay for that?
Well, it's all fungible. In other words, we're looking to maximize the value of the property and to use that money as efficiently and as well as we can. So the idea is that if we control the fit out of the branch, it will be the best library. It will be within our control, and we will build what we need and what we work on to develop, what we work on with the community to build, as opposed to leaving it to a third party.
Well, I'm not saying I'm all for you guys designing the space. You're the experts in library. But why isn't the developer paying for it? In my neighborhood, we tore down an elementary school. We sold the property to a developer, and we said, well, you know what we want in response? We want a state-of-the-art middle school. And he gave us everything we wanted and more because he was going to make so much money off the sale of apartments, and he did. You know, and so I guess my great fear is, and the Assemblywoman pointed it out, is this doesn't seem to be a holistic plan to move the BPL forward. This seems to be a plan of constant crisis. You know, if you're going to do traumatic surgery, you better stop the bleeding. I don't see the bleeding stopping here. I see you're, you know, just jumping from sort of crisis to crisis. Why are we rushing into this plan? You're going to have a new administration, a new city council. You know, we're going to have new members of the Assembly and the Senate coming back next year. Why are we rushing this RFP now when we could be sitting down with a whole new group of players in just a few months to talk about what we can do to make sure that we're stabilizing the Brooklyn Public Library, not just jumping from crisis to crisis?
Well, I would argue that we are doing anything but rushing. We have been so deliberate about this, and that at this point we're chomping at the bit to get started. We are talking about a library that is so inefficient it doesn't make sense, frankly, to do anything with it, because it houses now, as I pointed out, two libraries. The business library, which we believe belongs at Central because we are monitoring the residences of where people are living and using, and who are using the business library, and the business library belongs in the center of the borough. And that part of the plan has nothing to do with the renovation project, with the new library. That part of the plan is just what makes sense for better library service to everybody in Brooklyn. So that's something that's been in the works for years. Actually, it was a plan that had been conceived before I came to the library, but which I wholeheartedly endorse. We have been deliberate and have worked openly as we can on this plan, and to delay, frankly, until we have a new administration so that we can then educate everybody else and then come to the same place frankly, doesn't help us. We will never, ever move the library forward if we don't get started on these projects. And to address your second point, this is not a situation where we're going from crisis to crisis. This is a plan which has been developed to avoid crises, not only in these particular communities, but in other communities that we haven't even begun to talk about, but which have libraries that are in substandard condition and need help now.
So you believe that this plan will raise you the $300 million to get you up to maintenance effort?
Absolutely will not yield anything like $300 million. Would that it could. But as I said to your colleague, Assemblymember Millman, it's not a single solution for the entire borough. It's a matter of coming up with various solutions to help out different types of real estates that have different values, that are serving diverse communities with and different services depending on where they're located. This is 1 million square feet of real estate. There is not a single solution that's going to make sense at every single branch.
How tall is the new structure at Brooklyn Heights? How tall could this new building be that's built in replace of the Brooklyn Heights Library?
I think it's 18.
So, have a seat, Mr. Nachowitz.
It's 10 FAR.
I'm sorry. My name is Josh Nachowitz, Vice President for Government and Community Relations at Brooklyn Public Library. To answer your question, Assemblyman, the current zoning at Brooklyn Heights allows for a building of 10 FAR at minimum. That 10 FAR is bonusable to 12 FAR with the inclusionary housing program, which translates to a building of between 125,000 and 178,000 square feet. And we haven't said what that could translate to in terms of height, because obviously that bulk can be distributed on the site in various different ways.
And that includes the 20,000 square feet for the library?
It includes the 20,000 square feet for the library. There is no benefit on that in the zoning for that location for community facilities. So that 125,000 square feet includes the 20,000 square feet for the library, so it leaves about 105,000 square feet of actual development potential.
So, Ms. Johnson, you pointed in your testimony to the fact that the city owns the land. Once you finish this RFP process and pick a winner, what approvals? Does the mayor have to give an approval? Does the city council have to give an approval? What are the next steps after that?
So because this is a city-owned property, the approval process includes ULURP. So there are any number of junctures as we go through this process where there'll be a lot of opportunity for public input.
So you talk about you've been deliberate and you don't want to wait any longer, but the ULURP process can last up to 18 months. So, I mean, why?
It will always last 18 months, regardless of when we begin.
Okay. So you feel that now it's now or never.
And it's not. It's hopefully 7 months, but that's
The controller recently did an audit of BPL, and it said that your assets had been, I believe, in 2011 had been $115.6 million, and in 2012 dropped down to about 91.7. Is there a reason for this drop in assets?
Yeah, it's an accounting issue, and it has to do with prepayment and when we receive funding. But it has not. First of all, it has to do with operating dollars, and it has nothing to do with the capital issues.
Okay. And finally, we've talked about Pacific, we've talked about Brooklyn Heights. At this time, are there any other libraries that you guys are envisioning selling?
Not at this time.
And what is the?
There is no other plan to sell libraries at this time.
So what's the timeline on Pacific? Is there going to be? For how long is the Pacific branch safe?
First of all, no library service will leave the community, so we won't do anything at Pacific until we've moved library services into the BAM South project. And at this point, the plans are not fully developed for Pacific. We've not spoken to anybody about selling it, about working collaboratively to renovate it or to redevelop the site. And so it's premature at this time for me to project exactly when, if ever, frankly, library service will no longer be provided at Pacific Street.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Assemblyman Roberts, do you have any questions? Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.